So, hello everyone. This is Garima from Markets and Markets, and we have come up with a new concept of the revenue talks for our recently launched YouTube channel. And we have Dan Grossman with us for our one of the revenue talks, and where he would be sharing the revenue impact stories based on his expertise. And since he belonged to the automotive sector, and the information which he will be sharing is, of course, of the utmost use. And I'll just quickly take it ahead and introduce him to each one of you, and then we can go ahead with the talk. So, Dan has an extensive experience successfully developing and transforming companies to achieve breakthrough results, competitive advantage, and shareholder view. He has been a part of pioneering five global brands, three successful public offerings, and has launched more than 100 new markets. Dan is currently CEO at Zexter. Prior to that, he worked as Vice President, Global Microtransit Services at Ford Motor Company and Chief Operations Officer for General Motors Mobility Team Maven, which he pioneered the creation of in September 2015. As COO, Dan launched and managed all new vehicle sharing and shared mobility business globally. And over the first 2 years, he and his team launched 18 new markets and with 6,500 cars and had more than 200 miles driven over the company's three mobility platforms. So this was the short introduction for Dan. And before we move ahead with the discussion, hi Dan, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for the introduction. It's good to be here.
Mhm. So great. Are you up for the revenue talk session for next 5 to 10 minutes at least?
Yeah, absolutely. Not a problem. Excited to share my thoughts with everybody.
Yeah, perfect. So, starting with the session, Dan, the first thing, of course, which I would like to know from your side and also our audience would be keen on, I would like to know how can you talk about your vast experience throughout your career? You can talk about yourself as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Look, I joined a small startup called Zipcar in 2009, and this was the very beginning of the sharing economy. You know, flash forward to 2021, it's everywhere. But in those days, we were really a pioneer, and car sharing was the kind of beginning of shared mobility. And so we were rapidly launching and deploying cars throughout North America as quickly as possible, and really evangelizing the fact that you didn't need to own a car, you could share a car. And that led to all sorts of, other things as you look to kind of see what's happening, today. But, in those days, it was definitely unique. And 2 years later, we went public, and 2 years after that, we were acquired by Avis Budget Group. So when you have a big car share or car rental company acquiring a car share company, it certainly validates, the business plan, to the extent that my next opportunity came from General Motors. In 2015, they were creating a mobility division, and I was recruited to move to Detroit and was one of the first external employees on a team that was eventually called Maven. And so with Maven, we created a new car share product, new technology, deployed it into 17 markets in 9 months, so really quick. And then did a deal with Lyft, invested $500 million with them, and started deploying EVs or Bolts with Lyft drivers. And at the time, that was incredibly innovative. And we were able to gather all of this data that eventually fed into Cruise, really, which is the autonomous arm, of General Motors. But again, kind of like Zipcar, all of this, was very new, at the time. The next opportunity came from Ford Motor Company. They had acquired a micro transit company called Chariot, and I was hired by Ford as a global vice president to help expand micro transit around the world. And so I spent about 3 months traveling everywhere, China, Europe, Middle East, and really trying to develop a plan in this version, of shared mobility. I ultimately became CEO of Chariot and ended up spending the majority of my time there growing and expanding, our product lineup and technology, which also had arms, into the autonomous team, which at that time in 2017 was very, very young. But we were kind of the beginning of what's turned into something much bigger, with Ford. Most recently, I'm working with a number of small startups in the last mile delivery, in the autonomous space, and electric vehicle car sharing. So I spend most of my time as a board member and advisor to a number of these companies, and there is tremendous opportunities right now and new technologies that are really changing the entire mobility landscape, and it's really exciting right now.
Great, great. So moving ahead, it was really a gist of your throughout career and everything. So moving ahead with the second question or the second thing, like how would mobility options and the auto industry change in next 5 to 10 years? Like, what do you think about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know when I joined General Motors in 2015, that was really a comment Mary Barra had made. So this is 2015, and her feeling was the auto industry was going to change more in the next 5 years than it has in the last 50. And so, go flash forward 5 years later, 2020, there were rapid changes with autonomous, electrification, um, different vehicle configurations that would feed into both electric vehicles and the autonomous aspirations of companies like General Motors. And so looking at 2021, now you have commitments from companies like GM and Ford to turn their entire fleets into electric vehicles and not have internal combustion engines, at some point in the future. And that is a huge change. And so you've got to have the right sort of, adoption and utilization to make it work. But I think there are really strong signs right now, specifically on the electric vehicle infrastructure side, that you will be able to deploy thousands of electric vehicles that will be doing all kinds of different things, because you don't really want to assume that you're going to have kind of one vehicle and one buyer in 10 years. You're probably going to have, more of a shared environment. And that's not even talking about the autonomous piece, but you could have taxi, sharing, delivery, trucking, rental, and all of that is going to be, I think, a part of the momentum that's going to be created over the next 5 to 10 years. You're going to have these vehicles that will be utilities that can be used by an individual driver or shared among a number of drivers and for different businesses. It could be a food delivery, it could be short haul trucking, it could be a combination of both. And when you have the electric vehicle grid set up, the right way and the range at appropriate levels, I think it's a really exciting time. It's a really exciting future opportunity for big OEMs. And so you're seeing different form factors being developed right now. Cadillac just introduced, a new form factor for an electric vehicle. You've got Zoox, which was acquired by Amazon, that has their own form factor. So these kind of future vehicles were, built for the specific use case of a shared utility and a future autonomous electric world. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that coming in, even outside the OEMs, with delivery companies like UPS and FedEx. And I mean, UPS is working with Verizon right now on air drone delivery with a program called Flight Forward. And if that is successful, they've had 3,800 deliveries so far. You may start seeing, companies like Ford and GM, getting involved in building these vehicles for delivery companies. So you've got land drones and air drones. And so, 10 years ago, Ford and GM were making all their money on trucks. 10 years from now, they may be making their money in very different ways. And so you'll see these offset revenues. So maybe personal vehicle ownership potentially goes down, but you're going to have these offset revenues coming from all of these other exciting products that will probably be in place in, by the next 10 years.
Sure, sure. And like since you mentioned that the industry would of course be evolving throughout, and it will definitely gonna be in the next 5 to 10 years as well. So if I talk about from the revenue impact perspectives, from the profits and the gains out there, so what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think revenue is going to come from a number of areas. Traditionally, big OEMs sell a vehicle to a dealer and they make a specific profit margin. And these have turned into 150, $200 billion businesses. But in the future, again, in an autonomous electric world, you may have, you're still going to have, the profit coming from the physical vehicle and the selling of the vehicle, but you could have additional revenue streams coming from subscription, coming from data. I think data is going to be king, both in kind of fleet orchestration, routing, and the electric sector. There could be more involvement in the physical EV charging and setting up EV charging networks and making money, off of that, if getting the grid together, the right way. And then it's autonomous, and it's how they want to play in the autonomous space, whether it's, in a robo-taxi form like Waymo or Cruise, and even Apple is talking about getting involved, and so that's really exciting. And then delivery and trucking, there could be short haul trucking, and these are different vehicles, long haul trucking, and then where does it fit into car rental? Right now, you've got, Hertz and Avis of the world, they buy, tremendous volume, from Ford and GM and others. And so how does car rental change in an autonomous electric world where potentially when you want to rent a car, maybe the car comes to you and it's fully charged and you may choose to drive it or not drive it and let the autonomous technology take care of that. And then, have the charging set up so where the appropriate charging network is for that vehicle. And then when you're done with the rental car, imagine the rental car dropping you off at the terminal and it drives itself back, to the lot. And so it's really it's just an amazing kind of future I think we have when it comes to vehicles, autonomous, electric, and all the opportunities on the business side that big OEMs are going to have. And so when you think of the revenue opportunity, instead of just one, I think there's going to be many, and it's just a matter of how they set up their systems, how they deploy their networks, and so ultimately I see revenue growing. It's just coming from different sources.
Rightly said. Rightly said. So, if just a quick question that which popped up to me while getting to know about the situations which you have shared right now. So, we have seen an ups and down in the automobile industry from past like 1 or 2 years. So, do you think it's gonna be uplifted in the near future? Of course, you mentioned it in your points. But
I'm bullish on the auto sector. I think they're just going to be different form factors. I think trucks continue to be king. SUVs continue to do extremely well, at least here in North America. Electric vehicles in Europe and China are doing incredibly well. And I think it's this, kind of rapid change that you're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years to these new vehicles that will propel the momentum and continue the uptick with big OEMs and their opportunity to create more revenue from existing fleets, but new revenue streams that I think will keep shareholders happy.
of course, understood. So, without taking much of your time, that we will move ahead to the last question which we have for you. Like, what would be the suggestions? What do you think from the leadership perspective in your industry, taking your geography into consideration, how the leadership will be elevating in the future times? Like, any suggestions or any case study based illustrations which you would like to quote over here?
Really, it's just the new kind of collaboration that these companies are seeing. And so when you run, an EV company, maybe you need somebody that, came from Ford or GM, or if you're at Ford and GM, maybe you need, some more technical experience or people with marketplace experience to set up kind of big networks. So it's really thinking kind of beyond your existing corporate ecosystem and the sort of experience and people that you can bring in to continue the momentum and expand, the product lineup in the right way. And so it's going to be a different, my opinion is it's going to be a different, company culture. It's good. There are going to be different people, sitting, at the leadership table, specifically in the next 5 to 10 years. And it's going to take all of these different experiences to create the sort of success they're going to need in a rapidly changing world.
Thank you so much for the information which you have shared with us. And it's perfectly bang on, which we were expecting, and sharing the revenue impact stories with the people out there. I'm sure the subscriber to our base will be benefiting it from it for sure. And it will gonna benefit the auto tech industry. And we'll definitely keep you posted on all the inline areas which we've come up with. So I thank you so much for your time. And if you would like to sum up the whole discussion, the platform is all yours, and then we can just.
No, I appreciate you having me. I mean, I have a perspective based on, my experience in 13 years in mobility and shared mobility. And I've learned a lot, from working at big OEMs like Ford and GM. And I'm so grateful for the experience and the people that I worked with that taught me, so many things that I'm now deploying with smaller companies that are going to create, phenomenal kind of revenue streams. And in many cases are working with huge, delivery companies and huge, manufacturers. And so it's a very kind of exciting time to be in the space right now. But as I said, thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much, Dan. It was pleasure speaking to you, and we'll definitely keep you posted on all the developments. Thank you so much.
Great.